Bill, thanks for being with us. So security, we know, is fairly tight at the Capitol. Are you surprised how many protesters were able to get inside the Capitol with things like flagpoles?
I certainly am surprised. I think it's disgraceful. The preparation that was needed had plenty of time to put everything into practice, and they just didn't. I can't understand why there wasn't enough security at the cathedral of our democracy, of our republic. The Capitol complex should be guarded much better than it was. I have no reason, I don't know why anybody in charge, any of the enforcement people in charge of that whole operation didn't have sufficient people there to prevent what we disgracefully saw this afternoon.
Well, nearby National Guard troops have been mobilized, and CBS has also learned the FBI is also on the scene at the Capitol. What might their role be?
Well, basically, I think with the National Guard is really to cordon the whole area off after the protesters are moved away by the local police, by the Capitol Police, and other police that are augmenting their forces. The Bureau is there, I think, probably as a backup group, and to look at some of the things that they might find on the premises after everybody has left. I'm sure that the hostage rescue team, that elite group of 50 or so people, is on the scene to protect that the Capitol complex.
What would you, Bill, have expected the police response to be, given that we know the tension has been building here, not just in recent days, not just even in recent weeks, but, some observers have pointed out there has been very forceful rhetoric now for months.
As I said, Elaine, I just can't understand why the defense forces for the Capitol complex weren't better prepared or better mobilized than we saw. You're right. They would have known, and they probably did know that the people were coming. I understand the right of free speech. I understand the amendments. I understand all of the people's rights to be there, but not to overtake the Capitol. To look at what happened on the floor of both the House and the Senate is disgraceful that ever should have happened, but they let it happen, and somebody will have to face the consequences of this despicable actions by the part of the protesters, but by the horrible response by those that are responsible for not letting that happen.
Bill, can you just kind of help us understand what the mechanics of a more adequately prepared police response would have been? Because from the very early hours in the afternoon, I heard a reporter on CBSN remark, someone who has covered Capitol Hill and knows very much what the normal sort of status quo environment looks like, remark about how close those demonstrators were allowed to be or had been able to get. This was before any word of actual violence. But she had expressed surprise about the proximity to the doors to the Capitol building itself.
Elaine, that's what's so disgraceful about this whole episode. You're absolutely right. There should have been a cordon around the Capitol complex to permit people to get just so far, knowing full well that if they got out of control, which it has, they were not going to be able to protect the Capitol the way they should. They should have had a perimeter with the National Guard, with many police personnel as they could, to protect that complex and to protect the people that were in there performing the work of the U.S. government and the citizens of this country. I have no idea why they didn't choose to do that, but putting a heavy piece of equipment in front of a door that's being hammered by protesters inside the building is disgraceful, and somebody will be held responsible for that.
So I know we are talking about different jurisdictions police-wise and different agencies in charge of security. It is the Capitol Hill Police Force that is in charge of the security there on the Capitol Hill complex. There have been folks, though, who have been pointing out the much more aggressive response by law enforcement to the Black Lives Matter protests that happened over this summer. You recall, Bill, those were across the street from the White House there in Lafayette Square. And I remember this very clearly because the demonstrators there were quite quiet and peaceful, essentially using signs, chanting. When, as we are watching this other video, this is early video from June, when in fact we saw officers and officials move in with chemical agents and level of force that we haven't seen from law enforcement yet on this current sort of situation that's happening at the Capitol. So does there appear to be disproportionate response here? When you look at those two scenarios, peaceful protesters back in June being met with chemical agents, and then armed protesters armed with flagpoles and forcing their way into the United States Capitol building. And at this point, we're seeing video inside from today in which our CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes described it as hand-to-hand combat, essentially, that Capitol Police were engaging in with demonstrators. Does this appear to be a proportionate or equal response here to these two demonstrations that we've seen?
I really don't know what prompted the response in both set of circumstances. In the first set of circumstances you mentioned to Antifa and whatnot, they responded to keep the people away, to keep the protesters, the violent protesters, not all protesters, but the violent protesters away from the Capitol building. Somebody made a decision based on whatever that was to let them get closer to the Capitol complex, which was absolutely the wrong decision to make and should have been known. They should have treated both groups in the exact same way. They let Antifa come just so close. They should let this group that appeared today to come within the same distance and keep them away from the Capitol. It is disgraceful what happened today, and there should be some recognition of all of that.
Bill Gavin, thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your insight with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.